Save the Semantics, episode 299. It is March 13th, 2025. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Thursday evening. Very nice post-rain weather we got right now. Honestly, I'm glad that things just kind of cleared up. It was super stormy for like about, I don't know, at least for like a couple of days. I was worried about like just, I don't know, the power going out and stuff like that, but luckily it worked out. luckily it worked out. So yeah, this weather, you get just this like crisp air and everything like that. Post rain weather is some of my favorite, but yeah, it's been nice to kind of experience that. But yeah, another kind of another fairly busy week for basketball and for myself as well. But a lot of action going on, a lot of exciting stuff. I wanted to highlight. So yesterday, there were a handful of games that were pretty high octane, high tension, if you want to call it that. And I just kind of wanted to highlight those. I obviously wasn't able to watch everything, but I was happy that I was able to catch the ending, especially of the Knicks and Trailblazers game. Not expecting quite this banger of a game. It was a lot of fun going down to the wire. I think the game that I was anticipating most yesterday was like the Timberwolves and the Nuggets, but that one just got completely blown out of proportion. Minnesota just completely blew Denver out. So I was just kind of scoreboard watching a little bit, and I was like, this is just, for some reason, Minnesota just kind of owns Denver in that matchup. Apparently they're 3-0 on the season, and yeah, that's it. It seems that they kind of have their number, and that kind of makes me curious about a potential like playoff matchup against those two teams, right? Obviously, we saw what happened last year with Minnesota upsetting Denver in the second round, right? Just, I mean, Game 7 was one of the best games of the playoffs last year. I don't know if it's really particularly close. Well, actually, you could probably pinpoint to a few of the games in the Knicks and Sixers series, which is probably the best series in the playoffs last year, if you ask me. But I guess maybe the best overall game was that Game 7 game in Denver, where Minnesota came back from like a 20-point lead, and yeah, they came back and won. So I don't know, maybe some of that energy kind of carried over into this year. Even though they don't have Karl Anthony Towns, maybe they just kind of have like a recipe. Again, I haven't really watched, so it might be worthwhile on my end just to kind of take a look to see what they're doing right that's helping them kind of gain a sort of an advantage over the Nuggets. But interesting, though, very interesting. I think it is really going to be like matchup based, where certain lower seeds are going to have a certain advantage, especially in the Western Conference. Eastern Conference, a little less so, obviously, because teams that are kind of in the play-in mix are so much lesser of a caliber compared to the top dogs of the East, right? But in the West, you can make a lot of cases, like for like the Warriors. You could absolutely argue them. You can absolutely favor them in a matchup against, say a Houston or a Memphis or that kind of thing, right? So that it's all just kind of like matchup dependent. There are certain things that the Warriors have that maybe the Grizzlies don't. I mean, you could kind of pinpoint to like experience, defensive intensity, that kind of thing, right? Just pedigree, like all of those factors kind of factor into why the Warriors might be potentially favored, right? This is hypothetical, but just kind of based on where the standings currently are, it is entirely possible for us to face off against one of those two teams. So anything is possible. But yeah, that Denver, I didn't really watch it, just kind of scoreboard watching. The game I did watch though was the as I mentioned, the Knicks and Trailblazers game, which went down to the wire, went into overtime. Just crazy. I think it was something like 42 lead changes, which is the most since in forever. Since that kind of level of back and forth, absolutely ridiculous. There were some, again, as expected, there were some, maybe some suspect calls down the stretch, but regardless of that, I'm kind of glad that it didn't really necessarily dictate the result of the game, because the ending was Mikal Bridges hitting a buzzer beater 3 to help the Knicks win, but just a fun back and forth between these two teams. Scoot Henderson probably had his like career, one of the best games of his career yesterday. He really looked kind of like the prospect that was kind of promised going into the draft last year, right? I think there were a lot of expectations for him, just considering he was top 3 drafted, right, behind obviously behind Victor and Brandon Miller and that kind of thing. But it really feels that he's kind of rounded into the players that he's sort of supposed to be, and he's really trying to figure it out. I mean, he's still only like 20, you know what I mean? Obviously, it's hard to distinguish yourself from someone like a Wembanyama, but that is just such a monumental prospect and player type that no one has really seen before, that I don't really necessarily think that's even fair to kind of do that. I think it's fair to want more from a Scoot, but I do think that there were some real heavy kind of expectations placed on him, right? After the Dame trade, it was kind of, it was almost this sort of weight, this sort of responsibility that was placed on him to become kind of the face of their franchise. And, considering that Dame was able to kind of carry that team to playoff performances, like 50-point games and them losing and that kind of thing. And, how long he was, just like a decade plus with the Blazers and kind of really being their franchise player. It's really, I think it's tough to be kind of placed in that position. And also the fact that he is just such a different player compared to Dame, right? Dame is just a shot maker connoisseur, kind of in a similar fashion to like a Steph Curry, right? But Scoot is not that. He's much more of like a traditional kind of point guard. He works to kind of set up guys and that kind of thing. Yesterday's game, I think, was more of a showcase for his shot making. And he's much more of someone who is able to kind of get it downhill and into the rim and that kind of thing. He had some really like crafty finishes. But he looked good. He looked super confident. He looked like he had control. There were some moments where he turned the ball over, which is sort of expected. But he looked really, really good and just clean. And just like the energy he brought, and it was just exciting to kind of see that. And I felt like kind of happy for him as well, just considering just the kind of a bit of a tumultuous first year for him. And now that he's a little bit more given the reins, and I think there was like a whole discussion regarding his defense and that kind of thing, and it seems like he's also improved in that area as well. So things are kind of trending upward for him, and I think that's a really positive thing to kind of take away from that. Despite the loss, it is kind of a heartbreaking loss for Portland, losing at the buzzer like that. But it was a fun game, man. It was one of the better games that I've seen this year. Really, just fun. Like I mean, my palms were sweating. They were. I was really kind of into it. It's been a while since I've really had like that type of game. Is was really like, man, that was something. It did give me kind of it did get me kind of thinking though. I've seen like a quite a few game winning shots recently, along with the Mikal Bridges three. I saw the one. It was the Clippers and the Kings, and there was Kawhi's game winner, where he went with like a lefty hook. And then 2 nights ago, with the Bucks and the Pacers, Halliburton, they're down three against the Bucks. The Pacers are, and they run a play for him to get a shot off. And he gets fouled on a three by Giannis, hits it, and then makes the free throw for the 4-point play. Crazy stuff, man. That was a wild ending too. But I feel like I can even, I can kind of look back on just sort of the recent events, and there's been quite a lot of game winners, honestly. I think those are obviously the standout ones because two of them are buzzer beaters and one's a crazy ass shot. But it's been I think the level of play and the level of competition has certainly increased as we kind of go down the stretch toward the end of the regular season, going into the postseason, right? Teams are really ramping it up. Even teams that aren't really necessarily in the playoff hunt, in the play-in hunt, like the Blazers. But you kind of want to, if you are one of those teams, you are sort of wanting to play spoiler in some instances, right? Obviously there are the tanking teams. I'm gonna get to that conversation in a bit, but yeah, like in most cases you are gonna get teams like showing off the best that they can because a lot of them are wanting to win. A lot of most teams are wanting to win to get into playoff positioning, get a good seeding, avoid the play-in if they can, right? Those kinds of things. So there's been a lot of good games. It's been good. There's been good basketball, just in general. And also like March Madness starts up next week as well, so that might be something that I might keep my eye out on. But yeah, a lot of good stuff. A lot of good stuff. Let's talk about tanking though. I know this is kind of it's one of those topics that I think has been maybe chipped away at recently, is kind of what it feels like. I briefly watched, and this is some true, I'm kind of messed up in the head currently, because I was willing to watch a little bit of the Raptors and Sixers game where essentially both teams just sat out everybody except for their like G League guys. And I watched some of that because I was just curious as to like the extent by which the teams are willing to kind of deprive themselves in order so that they could lose and get a higher draft seed or like the probability of drafting higher, right? Earlier this week, I believe it was yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, the Jazz were fined $100,000 for sitting out Lauri Markkanen, essentially for tanking, right? And it's nothing. It is absolutely just it's just like a scratch for these franchises, right? But it does kind of set a sort of precedent where the NBA is looking at teams who are actively sitting out their best players if it's not for a obvious injury. In the case of the Utah, they have been so adamantly tanking that it actually kind of put them on notice a little bit, right? The issue here's the thing though. It's like, okay, cool, teams get kind of penalized for that. the issue just remains with maybe the lottery system, where the lower seeds are going to have the highest chance of drafting number one. Like, that's just kind of how it goes, right? Um, I've heard people propose like flattening the odds for just all the bad teams and that kind of thing. Um, I just don't know how that's gonna work necessarily, because it's like, you know, I think they've established that there is just a like, you know, with the lottery, you could argue that with like flat odds across the board for all of the teams that didn't like make the playoffs or whatever, it is entirely possible that one team just gets lucky and, you know, gets number one every time. But that might be a case like for any situation with, um, when you have like a draft lottery. I just don't know if that's enough to like dissuade teams to actively tank either, right? Because it's like, if you miss the playoffs, then it's like, I don't know. I don't know. It's like, maybe this is a good incentive for teams that are sort of in the middle, that maybe push, say a team like the Trailblazers. They're probably not going to get to the play-in. There's too many, they're too far back in the standings to get into 10th. But it might be a thing where it's like, if you don't get into the play-in, at least you have the same chance of drafting number one as the worst team in the league, right? I just don't know, like, because they have flattened the odds for like the top three worst teams in the league, I believe. But being the worst team has not guaranteed that you will get the first seed either. So I don't know. I don't know what the proposition is, because like, even despite those things, even though they have slightly flattened it, can they like do they need to like flatten it even further so that it is just completely evenly distributed amongst the other teams? Like, I don't know what the method would be to kind of decentivize teams from tanking, because that's just kind of the system that has been built over the years. You don't really want to see you don't really want to see that product, though, is the thing too. You know what I mean? I remember, and it's funny just kind of looking back with the Warriors and the way in which they tanked to get their draft capital back in like the 2010s, early 2010s. And it is very clear, like, of course Steph was injured and he was out for like, he was kind of consistently out for like the first few years of his career. So that kind of allowed them to continue to tank and that kind of thing, and try to, build and get more draft, and, obviously shipping off like someone like Monte and all that stuff. But it is like tough, because I do remember there were a lot of periods where you saw these kind of like G League, players brought up in like the starting lineup and that kind of thing. This is a long time ago. I think this is like 2010 or 2011. I remember the very last game of the season, where it was basically just all G League guys. And, oh man, I forgot his name. There was this one dude who had just like a career night. It was like Rodney McGrady or something like that. I don't know. I'm going to have to look this up. But I remember that they were like playing against, my memory is like super hazy, but the G League guys just fought their asses off. I was watching it. I of course wanted to win, because I didn't understand the concept of tanking, because I was a kid. Like, you don't know, you don't understand drafting and all that stuff. You want your team to be good. And I was like, just please give us this win. Please give us this win so that like we end the season on like a good note. And they just like barely lost, right? However, this loss was incredibly important for their drafting odds, and because of this loss, they had a higher chance to be able to draft more favorably. so and it was very significant. Like that kind of dictated like the potential for the rest of the Warriors. The Warriors kind of trajectory and everything, right? I think this was like the Clay pick. I think that might have been the Clay pick. So there's and it's just like it's such a contradiction. You know what I mean? I was watching a little bit. This was like last week or so. I was watching the Raptors and the Wizards play. This was like another example of like a pure, and this might have been earlier this week. I don't quite remember, but just like a pure tank, session. Jamal Shed, who's like one of the rookies for the Raptors, he put up a shot. He put up a game winner. That's why I was thinking of like game winners, because like he did one, and unfortunately, he still had the ball right on his fingertips as he let it go, and so it didn't count. So Raptors ended up losing, but it turned, that's a pretty, it kind of worked out in the favor of the team, like the organization, in terms of drafting and stuff like that, right? But I remember just like seeing the reactions of some of the fans, because like you as a fan, like you're at the game, you see a game winner, you see like a buzzer beater go down, it's like, yeah, that's like an awesome result, right? But it's just like, they end up losing, but it's ultimately like a win, a quote unquote win for the organization, because they can kind of stay as they are in the lottery standings. But it's just like, dude, it's weird, man. It's weird. I don't know. I don't know what the best method is for that. I don't like, what does it look like for other teams or like other leagues? You know what I mean? The NHL, the MLB, the NFL. Like I don't really know what because it doesn't seem like tanking is really a thing in the NFL at all. Like teams are just trying to win all the time. I don't know. It's just such a different environment, right? Like tanking is like so synonymous with the NBA, and it's unfortunate because it's not like a great product. I think it's fascinating seeing the nonsense some of these teams pull off to try to lose, but it doesn't make for like a good product for the fans. Like those are the people that get ultimately affected in a way, right? I was listening to like a podcast earlier, and one of the hosts made like a good point, just like a basketball podcast. I've been listening to a lot of basketball podcasts while I work and stuff. But one of the hosts made a good point where the consumer is the one that gets most affected by the product that is put on the court, right? So in the case of like the Raptors, actually, this is a shout out to like the Hello and Welcome podcast, which I've been listening to. I tend to kind of like, hop around different team podcasts, and they do a good one for like the Raptors and stuff. I'm just interested in just all things basketball. But they talked about how the consumer is the one that is most affected, right? They still have to pay really the same price for admission as they would if the star players were playing. And if you get to the game, and maybe maybe you're a casual fan, maybe this is like the one game this season that you as a fan are able to attend, because tickets are damn expensive, right? And so you pay all that, and just to see, like, no disrespect to like G League players by any means, right? Like they're trying to get a contract, they're trying to find a way to the NBA and that kind of thing. But the fans don't get what they paid for, right? And that's just kind of the unfortunate reality of all of this stuff. For those that, most fans are casual fans. Most fans are just like, they just want to, spend time with their family or their friends or whatever. Like that's just kind of, it's like an outing, it's an event, right? So it's like if they don't get like a good, I don't know, if they don't get like a good viewing or whatever, it's just it's gotta feel disappointing for like the kids especially, you know what I mean? It's like you want to see like the top players play. So I don't know, it's a little, there's got to be a way to curve this and to like try to make it so that there is not such a clear incentive to tank, right? Because if you are the worst team, if you are one of the worst teams, like, you have a good chance of getting the number one pick, but you also have I think you are almost like secure in like top 5 drafting odds, which is very significant, especially in some of the stronger draft classes like this year, right? So it's just like the organizations are doing what they feel like is in their best interest, so they can improve the team and the franchise, and they can potentially build around a franchise player that they drafted. But unfortunately, leading up to that point, it is going to be kind of tumultuous in the sense that the product on court is going to be intentionally poor. It's going to be intentionally made so that the team has a better chance of losing. And it's like, that is like just, it's ridiculous, right? And I know I'm sure people have been making this argument forever now, but like, it's just kind of dawned on me now that I've kind of reflected on that. It's just like, oh, it's almost like an accepted part of the game in a way, the accepted part of the NBA. But it's like, in what world, like, would you, I don't know, like, in what other scenario would you actively try to lose to maybe gain something back, other than, I don't know, I mean, of course, like, other than some shady shit like gambling and that kind of thing, right? If you are like, or if you are betting against the stock market, that kind of thing, that probably isn't going to age very well. But you know what I mean? It's you know what I mean? It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. It's not a good product. It's not really good basketball either, in a way. It's just, it just is like a bad reflection on the league. And I haven't looked into this enough to really make an assessment of what the best measures are to combat that. But I feel there needs to be something to change this type of behavior in a way, right? I do think Adam Silver has done some good stuff with like the play-in. The in-season tournament is cool. I think there are some kinks that probably should get worked out, but overall it's been good to kind of see like more competitive basketball earlier in the season. But I think the next big thing that the league should try to tackle is this whole tanking situation, because you get just a lot of teams, like 5, 6, 7 teams kind of doing that. That's not significant. That's like almost a third of the league kind of, kind of adhering to that practice. And it's just, that's kind of, it's not great. It's not great. Like, sure, you're going to have some teams that are going to, try to tank, or not tank, sorry, they're try to get into the plane and that kind of thing, right? And it's funny because I've pushed for a team like Chicago to tank. Like, I've explicitly kind of said that they should sort of, essentially burn it down and build it back up somehow, which does involve tanking and being a bad team, because they just sort of refuse to do that. But it's like, why wouldn't you want to try to win something, right? Maybe it's not the ultimate result of like a championship or whatever, but it's like, why wouldn't you want to try to at least put in some effort as a team to compete? Like, wouldn't fans want to see some level of that? Like, at least like the play-in gives a chance for those teams to put on some kind of performance. You know what I mean? And maybe I'm being a little. It sounds like I'm ass kissing the league for the for the play in or that kind of thing, but I think that is kind of the mindset that organizations like the Bulls are in. It's just like we can just kind of continually stay in this middle area. We don't ever have to really fully tank and that kind of thing, because tanking sucks. And trying to kind of blow things up to get draft capital is a whole process, and it takes time. And you can even look at a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder. Maybe it didn't take that much time for them to kind of get to this point, but it's like it was like they were one of the worst teams in the league for like a few seasons before they got to this point. So it's just kind of like, if that formula is successful, you look at that product, you look at the result of that, it's like then you kind of then you're going to see other teams kind of trying to replicate that, which I think most teams are, except for like the Bulls, which they just sort of are okay staying in that middle area. So I don't know. I don't know what exactly the solution is. I'm just kind of like airing out, not necessarily my frustrations, but just kind of my observations of the fact, right? It's weird. It's a weird kind of thing, but it is kind of fascinating. I just don't really know what the next best thing is to kind of discourage that. I don't really know. But yeah, it's fascinating. That is for sure. Apparently Cooper Fly got injured today, which is unfortunate. He got like some kind of ankle sprain, so hopefully it's not super significant. But yeah, I mean I'm sure he's still probably gonna go number one. But yeah, maybe, I don't know. Is that going to dissuade any teams from picking him because of that? I have no idea. It's probably really nothing for him, but yeah, hopefully he recovers. I am going to be watching the Warriors and Kings game later tonight. As I kind of commented on it a couple days ago, that should be something. I think that's going to be that's probably most likely going to be a pretty competitive game, just considering like the standings and everything like that, as I have kind of mentioned pretty repeatedly over the last week or so. But I'm looking forward to it. I think this will actually be a bit of a test for the Warriors. I think this will just kind of continue to sort of give them more to kind of work with. We can kind of see the ways in which Jimmy works with the system and that kind of thing. I'm very excited, and I should be able to actually watch the game without taking alternative methods, because it's going to be showing on TNT. So that's good. That's some good stuff. Yeah, outside of that, that's just kind of really been my focus, obviously, as I have mentioned repeatedly. But I'm kind of proud of myself for being able to kind of continue doing this. That I've really stuck with it. It's been a fun week. Just catching up with the games that I've been able to watch, things that have kind of caught my attention, all of those things, and just kind of like soaking in the present. Again, I've noticed, like, if I do record things after something happens, like, it feels like I'm just, I don't know, maybe I'm able to like collect my thoughts a little better, but I do like being able to, being able to kind of react more closer to the event, just so that my thoughts are a bit more fresh and my feelings about it are a bit more fresh, right? Because it's like once like 2-3 games and days have kind of gone by, it's like, it's just not the same. Like, in the moment kind of feeling is kind of what's up, man. So I do want to try my best to maybe kind of replicate this over the course of the rest of the season for the NBA and leading into the playoffs and that kind of thing. Just depending on just whatever, again, timing, energy, my energy, those kinds of things. I think I might. I'll try to record maybe on Saturday one more as well. Just sort of get us set up for like the weekend and that kind of thing, or Sunday. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I've so far I've been happy of what I've been able to kind of put out, and I like this sort of the format of doing a thing every day if I can. Not obviously not every day, but days where I do want to just record something, just doing it regardless of whatever, and just kind of pushing that through it. So it's been fun, and I think I'm gonna try my best to see if I want to try to keep doing this over the course of the next month or so, over the course of the rest of the season. Anyways, thanks for listening as always. This has been Save the Semantics, signing off.